Thank you very much. I've seen the responses. So, okay, hello everyone. My name is Lilian Mulamula. I'm working with the University of Dar es Salaam. I'm in the Faculty of Science, Department of Biological Sciences. I'm actually a lecturer, and my area of expertise are environment science, climate change, and ecosystem management. And I'll be taking you through this first guest lecture that is on climate crisis. But before I begin my lecture, I'd like to congratulate every one of you for looking for an opportunity to participate in this very important learning opportunity. And also, I'd like to congratulate you for being accepted and given this chance to participate in this training. And I believe that you will participate fully, you'll be eager to learn, and I believe that you'll learn a lot of some interesting and new issues on the climate change issue, on the climate crisis, as well as all other modules that will follow. And also that you'll be also sharing experiences, and you'll be committed to make sure that you don't just participate, but by the end of this training, you end up with something productive, you end up with a change in attitude so that together we take the necessary climate actions to protect our valuable planet. So, having said that, I'll go straight now to our first lecture, and that is on climate crisis. Can everyone see my screen? Can
Yes, we can see the screen.
Okay, thank you very much. So our first lecture, which is actually also an introductory lecture for our first module, and that is on climate crisis. So the first module will be on climate crisis, and this lecture is actually an introductory lecture whereby we go through a general picture of the climate crisis. And through this lecture, we'll go together and see on, like I said, the general introduction to the climate crisis, whereby we'll go on seeing what is actually happening as far as climate crisis is concerned. When we are talking of the climate change and the crisis accompanied with it, what is actually happening within our planet, and why is it happening? Why is the planet now in stress? Why is it happening? The climate change, why is it happening? We'll also go through why is it a crisis. So we'll look on some various indicators that show that why is the current climate change a crisis. And then together we'll go and see various responses and brainstorm on whether is it too late or we can actually do something to protect our climate. And like I said, the first part is what is happening, but before we go to that, I think it's also very, very important to understand the difference between weather and climate, because actually, usually when you go into the around the communities, you can find some people mixing out. Is it weather? Is it climate? What is actually happening? So I thought that it's important to get the very few key definitions. And one such a definition is on weather. And actually, weather is short-term atmospheric conditions in a specific place at a specific time. So what we're experiencing, for example, within very few days, maybe a week or a month, That would be weather. So you can have weather of a village or weather of a region, wherever you are, or whatever. Now, on the contrary, climate, on the other hand, is long-term patterns of elements of weather. There are several elements of weather, including temperature, rainfall, humidity, cloud cover, and others. So when these are observed over time and their patterns are established, then we have the climate. So this picture here, for example, is actually weather because you can see that the coverage of observation is from Monday to Friday. That would be weather. But on the contrary, if you are talking of several years, usually above 30 years, an average of above 30 years of selected elements of weather, then we are talking of the climate. For instance, we can have a tropical climate. Now, then if we have weather and climate, and what's of interest now is climate, then what is climate change now? We are hearing that is actually a global agenda nowadays. We're hearing of climate change, climate change, climate change. What is climate change? The the official definition that has actually been produced by IPCC. IPCC is a panel. It's called Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. That is actually responsible for documenting various issues on climate change. So it has produced a definition. The most recent report that was produced in 2023 gave this definition of climate change. So when we're talking of climate change, the report says that we are talking of the change in state of climate that can be identified by changes in mean or variability of these properties of climate. And usually, these changes are established through statistical tests. And these changes must persist for an extended period, typically decades or longer. And usually, it's usually 30 years or longer. So when we are talking of an average uh, change, I mean an average, a change in average over a long period of time, then we're talking of climate. And it refers to any change in climate over time. And climate change does not really mean that it has to be through the result of human activity. Sometimes, over the years, in the past millions of years, these changes have been occurring and they were actually the result of natural variabilities. Even though what is actually alarming nowadays, that is actually raising the voice, is because of the rate of change. So this change has been happening over time, and it can, and over times, over millions of years ago, it has always been through natural factors, but now it's more of concern because of the speed and its attribution to human activities. Oh,
Hello,
and
hello, Dr.
hello.
Lilian. Just a second. The slides are not moving. You're still on the first slide.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
actually, I was. So, and climate change, in a simple term, we can say that's the long-term shift in Earth's average temperature and weather conditions. Okay, so if we are, can you see my slide now?
Uh, the first slide. It's still on the first slide. The module one, the climate crisis.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't know why. Okay.
Maybe you can go to the presenter mode.
Okay.
On the top menu, there's after undo, there's an icon showing a computer, then a mark for play.
Okay. Let me see. That's you're talking about the through the Zoom.
No, on your slides on PowerPoint.
Yeah, I was on the presentation mode.
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
it
no,
moving now?
yeah, no, it's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've taken you through the contents, and they say that we'll look at what is happening, why is it happening, why is it a crisis, and then together we'll think whether it's too late and see the global responses. Is it moving?
Pardon?
Uh, Mwangu, is it moving now?
Yeah, no, it's running okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Maybe you can hide the icon for stop sharing. You can press
Yeah,
hide.
sure,
Yeah.
sure.
No,
Thank
it's
you.
okay. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. So I was talking on we have gone through the differences between weather and climate, and then I was actually in this slide where I was talking about the definition now. When we are talking of climate change, what do we actually mean? And I say that simply it can mean the long-term shift in the Earth's average temperature and weather conditions over time. And then I was in this slide. So if you're talking of what is happening, we are experiencing the changes. What is it really happening on the planet? Why are these changing happening? Is it like maybe the sun is emitting too much radiations, or is it something to do with human activities? What is the science behind? So, for us to understand what is actually happening, let's look at the Earth now. Here we have the Earth, and the Earth is actually covered, surrounded by the layer of gases, the atmosphere. Now, this cycle here represents the atmosphere. And now, what actually happens naturally, we have what is known as natural greenhouse effect. With natural greenhouse effect, it means that the atmosphere is having some gases that are actually playing a role of trapping some gases, some useful gases, trapping some gases, and maybe the gases around the atmosphere actually trapping some radiations, making the earth warm enough for us to live. And that is what is known as, or that is what is behind the natural greenhouse effect. And this is what happens during the day. Actually, the sun releases some radiation that comes into the earth's surface. The earth will absorb some of these radiations, and then it will also radiate, and that is actually usually felt well during the night because we don't have the sun, but the earth is still warm enough for us to live in. So the earth radiates radiations from the absorbed radiations. Yeah, as you can see, represented by this arrow. Now, when this gases reaches the blanket, the atmosphere, there is this blanket. Let me call this cycle as a blanket of gases. And these gases are the greenhouse gases. Now, this blanket actually will trap some heat. So, atmosphere will end up trapping some heat, and some of the heat will escape and goes out to space. That is naturally what is supposed to be happening. We have a layer of gases acting as, I can simply say, like as a blanket, allowing some gases to go out and some gases, sorry, some heat to go out and some heat will be trapped. And this natural greenhouse effect is very important to support life on Earth because the Earth will become warm enough for us to live in. Without the natural greenhouse effect, the Earth would have been very cold, and then it will not be able to support life. So we do need these greenhouse gases. Now, on the other hand, what is happening now, we have what is known as enhanced greenhouse effect. While on this side we have the natural greenhouse effect that is very important to support life on Earth, on this side we have enhanced greenhouse effect, whereby atmosphere has more greenhouse gases than it needs. Let's imagine that each greenhouse gas is a layer of blanket, then we have more blankets than we need. Heat that has been radiated from the Earth will reach this layer of gases. Some will be trapped as usual, but what happens is that less will go out to space, more will be trapped in the atmosphere. So you can see the difference in the size of arrow between this one and this one. Now, with enhanced greenhouse effect, more heat is trapped and it causes global warming. And this is what is bringing the problem. So in a funny picture, I found this fun picture on the internet that was produced by these artists. And they show that actually what is happening now is like the earth is actually covered with too much blankets than it's needed. And, without the blankets, the earth would not be able to live because the world, I mean, the life on earth would not be able to exist because it would have been very cold. But what happens if you are covered with more blankets than you need? That means you are becoming too hot than you want. And this is what is happening now. These greenhouse gases, for example, we have a blanket of carbon dioxide, we have a blanket of methane, we have a blanket of nitrous oxide. All these are greenhouse gases. So this earth is covered with all these blankets, which are heavier than it's supposed to be. And then what happens is that it is becoming warmer than it wants. So you can see here the earth is actually complaining, oh, I'm too hot. Please, no more greenhouse gas blankets. Now, if what is happening scientifically is that we are having these too much blankets, then why is the layer of blankets increasing? Why are we having too much greenhouse gases? This graph here was produced by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, and it gives the observations. What has been observed with regard to the temperature trend since the Industrial Revolution, and these scientists modeled the observation. I mean, two basic scenarios. One whereby they try to model what will happen with the global surface temperature if only the natural drivers are involved, and this is represented by the green line here. This was the scenario where only natural drivers were involved, and this scenario here is on human and natural drivers here. And you can see from this picture, when they modeled, they came up with the finding that if only natural drivers were involved in the climate, then the trend of the climate would have been this green here. It means there wouldn't be increase in global temperature. Now, when they went to the second scenario, whereby the human and natural drivers were involved, you can see that after the 1950s, the global temperature has been increasing, was observed to be increasing. This is a second scenario, the model scenario, which combined the human and natural drivers. And this scenario highly correlated with what has been observed, which is presented in the black line here. So this black line is actually the observed temperature, and these are model scenarios. So they did some modeling. In the first scenario, human and natural drivers involved, which went very much correlated with what has been observed. But if they had another scenario where only natural drivers were involved, the increase in temperature was observed. So this concluded that the observed increase in temperature that is actually being represented by the black line here correlates very well with the combination of human and natural drivers. And this actually indicates that human drivers are the primary cause of the observed increase in temperature, because when just natural drivers were involved in their model, the increase in temperatures was observed. So if there are these human activities, what are actually now those activities involved? This picture here summarizes what we are doing that is actually resulting into problems. Human activities tends to release these greenhouse gases. Here you can see the picture of industrial emissions of various greenhouse gases. We release too much greenhouse gases into the atmosphere due to our industrial activities, resulting into increase in the layer of blanket into the atmosphere. This here is deforestation. Deforestation is actually having two double effects in the atmosphere. First, as we are deforesting, we are reducing the natural carbon sinks that would actually naturally trap the atmospheric carbon dioxide and store it. So as we are doing it, we are reducing the natural carbon sink. But again, the composition of these will release the stored carbon. Usually plants do store carbons in their parts. So if these are decomposed, we are actually now ending up also releasing the stored carbon into the atmosphere. This is agricultural activities. We are applying some artificial fertilizers, which end up releasing some nitrous oxide gases into the atmosphere, again, which is one of the greenhouse gas, ending up increasing the blanket of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere and affecting our climate. This here are the emissions from the cars. You know that majority of the cars use fossil fuels, and so they end up releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. We have release of methane from animal husbandry. Actually, animals do tend to release methane as they burp, and so we are releasing some methane into the atmosphere, which is also greenhouse gas affecting the climate. This is landfill. Landfills also tend to release some methane. The activities that are taking place in the landfills ends up releasing methane into the atmosphere, again increasing the layer of gases into the atmosphere. Now, if we have seen that that is what is happening, and then we have seen that what is behind, why is it happening, meaning that the science behind. And then let's think again. If we are having this increase in temperature, if we are having this um, change in various aspects of the climate, why is it a crisis? And this again brings us to our module, the climate crisis. Why is it a crisis? Why is climate change a crisis? Maybe before I go into that, I really wish my class would be a bit interactive. So if Mwangwi, you can allow, maybe we can pause for a few minutes and listen from the participants. Why do they think now climate is a crisis? So if you can allow some few participants to answer, why do they think it is a crisis?
Maybe if you want to talk, you can raise your hand. There's a place where you can select to raise your hand so that I can unmute you.
Do we have any hands?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, James.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much, Lilian, for the presentation. I think it's going on well. I want just to contribute. I'm James, the Methodist student at Kibu University. For me, I think climate change is a crisis now because of when we have the changing patterns of weather patterns, that's rains and temperatures and others. I think it will be having a negative impact on agricultural activities. And many of the people or many of the humans in the earth are depending on agricultural activities for food security. So if we have a climate crisis, we will be having food insecurity crisis also that will impact human lives. Things like drought. Drought will impact both crop production farmers and also livestock production farmers, of which those are human livelihood for the source of income and food. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other contribution?
Hello,
Yes,
good.
welcome.
So I also want to add, I'm based in Ghana. So
Yes.
last year I collected data among smallholder farmers, and there was a serious drought in my research community. Last year. So apart from the farmers who are directly producing, I also see that the entire agricultural value chain is affected when crops failed. So that's a serious crisis we are seeing from the climate change impact. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your wonderful contribution. Any other contribution? Why is it a crisis?
India, you can go next.
Okay.
Hello.
So
Yes, India, you can go next.
oh, we have Cindy. Okay, Cindy, welcome, Cindy.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Cynthia from the University of Nairobi. And I would say climate change is a crisis because it's being experienced in different countries. It goes beyond countries in different continents. And it also disrupts ecosystem, both human beings and living things. And I would say, for instance, we've experienced extreme weather events in Kenya, in the arid and semi-arid lands like Turkana and Marsabit. We've experienced a long drought in so many years, which was the worst one in 40 years. And it really had so many effects to both the human beings and animals. livestock died, and the communities were even forced to migrate. And even it resulted in conflict. There are communities there which engage in conflict. That's because of climate change. And also we experienced floods in Kenya. And as we know, floods has serious effects on people. People are forced to migrate, to move to other parts, and it also destroyed properties. So I would say climate change is a crisis. Everybody feels it, despite where you are in different continents. People experience it, even the ecosystems. It disrupts the ecosystem. So that's my explanation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Cynthia. So you're all actually, I'm happy that you are. Oh, is there any other contribution? Okay, thank you, everyone who have contributed, and actually you're very, very right. One big reason behind the fact, I mean, one big reason as to why this is a crisis is because of its impacts. Like how what Cynthia has said, nobody's safe, regardless of whether you contributed into this crisis or not. The causing agents might be originating from maybe some activities of very few countries, but the impacts are actually felt globally. And again, and another reason is that, which is actually a sad reason, is that while these impacts are affected globally, the extent of impact might vary in different regions. So, why is it a crisis? One major reason is that it's because of its impacts. And these impacts are felt globally. Why is it a crisis? Number one, it's because the temperatures now are actually rising to record high. And with a rising temperature, there are also some associating changing in climatic variables. I've added some images here, as you can see. This was a report by BBC on a heat wave in West Africa, in Sahel, that affected this heat wave was serious, and it was concluded that this was impossible without being associated with human-induced climate change. That's what scientists say. This was reported in South Africa, for example, with reference to increases in temperatures. South Africa is on the brink of global heating disaster. Too much heating was being experienced in the regions. So it is a crisis. One, because these temperatures are rising to the record high. It has never been like that. It was never expected, but this is what is happening. It is a crisis because, again, because of its impacts on food and water insecurity. I mean, food and water security. So it is resulting into food and water insecurity. Why food insecurity? Number one reason is that climate change as it is actually a direct cause of soil degradation. If you're experiencing too much temperature, what does it mean? It means that soil moisture will be reduced. In some areas, we will experience drought, like what Cynthia has said, they experienced in Turkana. So, if the land is that much dry and there is a reduced soil moisture, it means that that soil will be degraded. It will not be as productive as it was is expected to be. Again, if we are experiencing the extreme of rainfall. Maybe you are experiencing intense rainfall and flooding. This again will affect the soil productivity because it will affect the nutrients that are found within the soil. Some nutrients will run away through with erosion. If you take the top most part layer of the soil, that's the most nutritious part. So if it is moved from one place to another, it means that soil erosion will result into loss of nutrients. Too much rainfall will also result into leaching of nutrients. Some, as water is being absorbed into the soil, also those nutrients that were found on top, if there is too much rainfall, they will leach, they might go to deeper soil that the plants cannot reach them. What does it mean? Again, the soil has been degraded. Again, if we are having this too much temperature, we end up with loss of vegetation. Maybe some vegetation will dry. If you reduce the plant cover, what does it mean? First, you're exposing the soil to erosion. And that means, again, the soil will be degraded. The soil productivity will be lower. But again, it is the vegetation cover that is actually also a very important source of nutrients. When the decomposition takes place on these fallen vegetation, then we have the nutrient cycles and the sources of nutrients. Now, if you have less plant cover, it means even input of organic matter will be lower. And then, what does it mean? The soil is being degraded. And also desertification and land degradation. If we end up at the end with a desert or a degraded land, then definitely the soil will no longer be productive. So it is a crisis also due to its impact on food and water securities, meaning that it results into global food and water insecurity. And why water insecurity? Because it ends up limiting availability of quality of water for drinking and agriculture. If there is too much temperature, the water sources, the surface water sources will dry. What will it mean? We have less water. And if the surface water dries, it means also we are affecting again for those agricultural activities that are depending on the surface water. Again, we are affecting the food security. So number two reason why is it a crisis? It's because of its impact on the global food and water securities. Number three reason, it is a crisis because with it we receive or we're experiencing some new extremes. Just to remind you that disasters that are linked to climate and weather extremes have always been part of our ecosystem. I'm sure we have all heard of issues of maybe ice age. There were some times where the earth was covered by ice. Some floods, for example, it is also believed, scientists believe that even the Noah, for those Christians, you know about the Noah flood, the floods during Noah, that was actually, maybe it was because of these climate extremes. So these disasters linked to climate have always been there. They have been part of our ecosystem. However, why is it a crisis now? It's because of the frequency and intensity of these extremes. And these are increasing as the world is becoming warm. No continent is left untouched. We are experiencing heat waves almost everywhere. I came through a report that said that the average temperatures for the average temperatures that have been observed in January 2025 is actually above 1.7 degrees centigrade, 1.75 degrees centigrade, which is a record high. It has never been like that. So The extremes are becoming more frequent and more intense, and they are highly, highly linked with the warming of the world. So we have heard of heat waves, we can hear of drought. Cynthia mentioned about droughts, and another contributor, sorry, I couldn't catch your name, but we also mentioned about the negative impact that have been experienced on the agricultural activities. So these extremes are becoming more and more intense and more frequent, again, raising a concern. And with these extremes, they are usually associated with massive destructions around the world. And according to a report by United Nations Environment, the UNEP, that approximately 90% of disasters now are actually related to weather and climate, and so they are classified as weather and climate related. So this is why climate change is actually a crisis. It is also a crisis because of it is a catalyst for conflicts. I know one of you also mentioned the indirect cause of conflicts being that related to climate. So climate change is a major threat to international peace and security. Why is it a threat? Because it results into limited resources, and if you are having a limited food, limited water, limited productive lands, like we have seen that climate change leads to soil degradation, that means the soil productivity being lowered, then that will definitely result into competition for resources, such as land, food, and water. And if the communities are competing for resources, it means that this will fuel socioeconomic tensions, and increasing will lead into massive displacement. Why massive displacement? Some people will have to move. No community, no family will stay in an unproductive land because nobody is ready to die of hunger. So naturally, people will end up moving, looking for productive lands, looking for water sources, and as they are moving, first we don't expect that they will end up into virgin natural lands that have never been occupied. They will end up into lands that actually maybe they are resources of some other communities. And what does it mean? It means that it will result into conflict over those resources. But also as they are moving, they usually pass through some communities. And for example, think of maybe a movement of pastoralists as they are moving from one place to another, looking for water sources, looking for pasture for the livestock. Usually, these movements are associated with conflicts along the way. So, climate change is actually a catalyst of conflicts. And generally, we can also say it's a risk multiplier. If there is an existing challenge, or if there is existing conflict, climate change can play as a risk multiplier. I've added some examples here of what is happening as far as conflicts are concerned. So if I had talked to Cynthia prior to this, I would have added Turkana here, the conflicts in Turkana, and as one of the conflicts. But I have some examples here where, for example, in Somalia, we know that the land is actually prone to drought, and the climate crisis worsened conflicts between clans that are living in that area as they were fighting over water and grazing land. And unfortunately, those bad groups, whether being terrorists or what, would take advantage of the situations and control aid and resources. So it was more of a risk multiplier. communities in crisis, and then if there is limited resources, more fighting, the risk becomes higher and the conflict becomes even more serious. Another example is what has been observed in Sudan. While there are some conflict between farmers and herders, drought is weathening the situation. Another observation has been seen in Mali, in Sahel region. Again, there are some conflict between farmers and herders. And as a result, some people, young people are actually moving into armed groups like the Boko Haram for survival. So again, that's a problem. There is also an observation in Nigeria where we have this lake known as Lake Chad, and the observations are shown that the lake is shrinking. Now, this results in conflicts between fishermen, farmers, and herders. And this instability is also benefiting the extremist groups like the Boko Haram. So, in general, it is also a concern because it is a catalyst for conflicts, as you can see here. Climate change is also a crisis because it's impacting the biodiversity. It's important to take note that the main driver of biodiversity loss is still human use of land, primarily for food production. However, climate change now is increasingly becoming another driver of biodiversity loss. How is it affecting it? Because it's tackling marine, terrestrial, and freshwater ecosystems around the world. Some species are being lost. Some diseases, for example, if they are vectors, the rise in temperature tends to favor growth of vectors, and so at the end of the day, diseases will increase. Some plants and animals that cannot cope ends up dying. So I have this image that I took from the website of UN, and you can see that this is actually a prediction. We are actually now here at plus 1.5 degrees of centigrade above the industrial level averages. This is where we are now. And it is believed that 4% of mammals are losing half their habitats. If we reach to 2 degrees increase of average temperature, then 8% of mammals will end up losing their habitat. If it happens, we reach into plus 3%. It is projected that about 41% of mammals will lose half their habitat. And what does it mean? It means unless something is done, the climate change is leading into the first climate-driven extinction. And so it is a crisis. With marine ecosystems, the issue is even worse. While with the terrestrial ecosystems, some animals actually, the rate is not as high as compared to the direct impact of human activities on the use of land. But with marine ecosystems, every fraction of degree matters, with the coral reefs, for example. The coral reefs are increasingly being affected by climate. At the moment, as we are now around this 1.5, it is believed that 7 to 9% of coral reefs will vanish. And we are actually now within this temperature. And if it happens that we reach 2 degrees above the average after post-industrial temperatures, then 99% of coral reefs will vanish. So those are some of the key reasons as per why it is a crisis. It's because of its impacts, the general impacts on the increase in temperature, the impact on food and water security, the impact on uh, biodiversity, the impact on security. And these impacts are felt globally, so it is a global crisis. Now, here comes a question that I would like to hear from you. What do you think? Is it too late to act? I've quoted a statement by Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, while he was opening um, the Conference of Parties, the 25th Conference of Parties in Spain, that was held in Spain. He gave this important statement. The climate emergency is a race we are losing, but it's a race we can win. This is according to Antonio Guterres. Now I'd like to hear from you. What do you think? Do you agree with Antonio Guterres? Do you think we can still do something? Or do you think it is too late?
Pendani had a contribution. Pendani, you can go first, then Joshua.
When it comes to climate change, I believe we can win. The only problem is a lot of people are just reluctant to act because it hasn't happened to them yet. But what I think is when we continue forming these organizations, these groups, sensitizing the people around the world to actually focus on one goal, which is to make like clean energy or sustainable living, we can win the race. But so far, I feel like we're not that far behind because a lot of people are now realizing that a lot of things that they're seeing on TV is now happening to them due to climate change. So for me, in Zambia, we've seen firsthand what the drought has done to us. It's where it's gone and touched our electrical grid. So we're suffering from power outages. In certain areas, again, we have floods. So now everyone who's now hearing about climate change, they can now relate and they're now going towards it. So yeah, that's what I can say about my contribution.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So you believe that we can win, even though some people are reluctant.
I can say Joshua. Joshua, you can go next. Joshua, if you can hear me. Maybe the next person, Parita.
Thank you very much, Molimo. You know, this statement, the climate emergency is a race we are losing, but it is a race we can win. If we really look at today's scenario, based on what the president of the US has been doing, withdrawing from the Paris Agreement, and vouches for the use of fossil fuels, which direction are we really heading towards? Because I've seen that he has also narrowed down to removing the deal on plastics, the single-use plastics, that they are going to keep on manufacturing them, which is even going to have a greater impact on the climate, on the physical environment of the earth. So, and again, with the use of fossil fuels increasing, it will be 2 degrees plus, plus, plus. So really, which way are we heading towards? Because that is the question now, because this statement was made in 2019, but this is the current situation is something very different. So what next?
Thank you very much, Farita. I like your concluding statement. What next? As you can see that if you look at this statement, he said that it's a race we are losing, meaning that if we go as we are going, we are going to lose. If we go as we are going, we are actually on the losing side. And this is actually what you are mentioning, which you have actually said that it seems that we are still on the losing side. But again, he said that it's a race we can win. And with the second sub-statement, that is a race we can win, that brought your question. So what next? What do you think? Do you think we have something to do? Do you think we can do something? Should we leave everything? Now, you have mentioned about the issue with the president of the US and the way he's withdrawing from the Paris agreements and withdrawing some fundings. Actually, with the Paris agreement, there are also some agreements on funding to support these developing worlds. So if he is withdrawing some funds, then it definitely is affecting the previous agreements. Now, what do you think? Should we just give up because we are not getting support? Do we have a role to play? Maybe I would like to hear from another contributor. It's a race we are losing. Should we
Yeah,
agree to lose?
I can see we have quite a number of people who are willing to contribute.
Okay. Kindly let
Yeah,
them in.
yeah, maybe we can have Hope next, then Fabian.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think basically, though we are on the far behind, like we are currently on the losing side, but I believe we can win this race, because if there is commitment even from the governments in almost each and every country, they can put up policies which ensure that people's activities which contribute to these happenings get reduced. For example, I'm from Zambia, and Zambia we have also experienced droughts like in 2021, and then this year we had floods actually. So even people have started realizing, even in the rural areas, because even the rivers were drying up. So they were asking, what are we supposed to do? So basically, I believe governments also can come in to put up policies which can sensitize first people, also prohibit actions such as deforestation, because even deforestation, it contributes to the drying of rivers and so forth. So even in universities particularly, because it's a shift of mindset, if indeed people are not taught this thing particularly, they don't see the importance of it, then even the next generation that is coming, they won't put much effort into preventing it. But it's visible already, and everyone is committed to do something about it, but how? So I think policies will play a big part and a role in this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Hope. So I've heard Parita mentioning about the issue of developing world and their efforts and how some are withdrawing from the agreements. Hope you have mentioned about the commitments from the government. Again, we are at the higher level. Uh-huh. And you have mentioned how Zambia, you have actually experienced some of these, and people are becoming aware of actually this is actually a threat, this is actually a crisis, and you're thinking that the government should do something. Any other contribution, please, before we go to the next discussion?
Yeah, Fabian, you can unmute and contribute briefly.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Fabian Osir, a student from Kisii University. Actually, I want to add a point on what my brother said from Zambia. So my point goes, okay, while the crisis is severe, but I know I strongly believe that through the United Nations across Africa and also particularly in our own countries, we can try to implement certain awareness in fighting these crises through protecting our forests, and also we can also implement some reducing carbon emission strategies. We can also adopt renewable energy, protecting renewable energy, and also we can create awareness about the improving climate resilience. So I strongly believe that we can fight this crisis, but the longer we delay, the harder it will be to reverse the damage. But with the political will, technological innovation, and global cooperation, we can still make a meaningful impact. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fabian. I like that. I actually like the way you have moved from Rita, who was looking at the US and the other developed world. And then we have seen Hope, who moved now into our governments, that the government have to make some policies and everything. And I like that Fabian has even moved to a closer um, I can say maybe a closer cycle to us. So apart from the issues of UN, but you have also mentioned about what we can do, protecting our forests, doing some renewable, using renewable energies. But again, we still insisted on the issue of political will. So I hope we'll have some few minutes at the end to look now at what we as individuals can do. Should we just wait for those at higher levels, at the government, at the UN, the developed world to do something? What if they give up? What if they withdraw from the efforts? Should we just sit and relax? Does it mean that we will be safe from the impact? So quickly, let me go to this slide. So it is not too late. While science tells us that climate change is overwhelming, it also tells that it's not too late to change, to stem the tide. However, for us to win, it's important to have some fundamental transformations in all aspects of society. Moving from individuals, how we grow our foods, how we use our land, how we transport our goods, to the higher level, how we power our economies. So, for us to win, it means that we have to do some serious transformations from the way we do our stuff, from the way we do our daily to daily activities to the higher levels on how countries power the economy. For example, Fabian mentioned about the issue of technologies. So how? What if we have new and efficient technologies? These are increasing. Scientists are investing in these technologies. So this can help us reduce emissions. And the good thing is, majority of renewable energies now is they might be maybe some capital at the beginning, but they actually cheap. From our individual levels, we can also do some activities, what are known as nature-based solutions, which are benefiting the economies, our local economies, but again, we are also reducing the emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions. For example, issues of land restoration. That means we are restoring the land, making it more productive, conservations, afforestation programs, etc. I will welcome again some suggestions from you, but I think for the benefit of time, let me go to this. Parita and Hope mentioned about the governments. The good thing is the governments are also on the side that we are not too late. So there are some efforts that are being done by these various governments. For example, we all know that nearly 2,000 governments signed this, what is known as the Paris Agreement, whereby countries pledge to limit global warming to well below 2%. Thank you, Parita. You mentioned that some countries are actually not as serious as agreeing with this, but one country should not stop the rest from doing something. So the countries, the governments are also doing something. So they signed, for example, this Paris Agreement, whereby they pledged to limit global warming to well below 2%. Nations are also supposed to submit and update their actions on how they are going to reduce contribution climate climate greenhouse gases. So they committed. They're having some commitments, and they submit how they are going to implement those commitments. And these documents, which are known as NDC, nationally determined contributions, are produced every 5 years. So they commit. Through the Paris Agreements, also governments emphasize on financial and technological support for developing countries and promotes global cooperation, climate change mitigation, and adaptation. I know that, Marisa, you're not happy with what is happening in the US, but that doesn't mean that the remaining 100 and around more than 190 countries are not supporting. So this is what the governments are doing. And even those in the developing world, which might not be able to contribute financially, but we are also having our commitments that let us do, we'll do this and this and this. Now it is left now with the hands of the authorities to make sure that these commitments are actually being adhered to. Another notable contribution by the government is that the commitments they do every year, where they meet every year to discuss their climate commitments. For example, at the recent meeting in 2024, the rich countries committed to giving around $300 billion to developing nations and help in helping them tackle climate change. So you can see that governments are doing something. We know that there are also some ongoing efforts, like what is happening now with this open online course on climate change. These are also some efforts by other, not necessarily governments, but also by some researchers, some academic institutions, some funders, like the one who funded this activity. So there are some efforts that are going on. But those were the efforts by the government. Like I said, I like the way that we have moved from Parita's contribution and how that she was unhappy with the US. And then we moved from Hope, who mentioned about commitment by government. And then we had Fabian, who now moved to individual levels. Now I'd like to use this, if you can use some part of this remaining time, to listen to the rest. Well, yes, we expect that many changes will come from governments and businesses, but it's true, it's a fact that individuals, me and you, can do something as well. We, as undergraduate students, we are the youth of Africa of today. Should we just sit and wait for the government to put some commitments? Should we just wait and wait for a certain miraculous policy from the government? Or we can do something. Now I want you to think of you as an individual. Do you think you can help? You as Fabian, you as any other member, do you think you can help? Think of your everyday choices. Do you think you have any way that you can help through your everyday choice of activity? So, Mwangwi, if you can allow some few contributions. from the participants. What do they think?
Yeah, I can see
From the
James.
individual.
I can see James raised his hand the first, and also those on the chat. I can see some of you had raised their hand. Maybe you can use the icon for raising your hand so that you can keep track and maybe select you for your contribution. Thank you. James, you can go on.
Thank you so much. For me, on climate change, I can say climate change or climate crisis is not a one-man effort. It's not an individual as a person. It's not a government. It's not an organization, but it is everyone harm. It's everyone effort. And for me, I think to win a climate change crisis, we need an holistic approach because we know the sources or the causes of this climate change, and one driver is human by interfering on ecosystems. But for the individuals, I think issue being with behavioral change, cultural issues, has to be gone from the individual level. That somebody is ready to secure the ecosystem like the forest. You know, many people are doing deforestation either for sugar burning or for timber making, and those are individuals. So if those individuals realizes that the more they do deforestation, the more harm or the more climate crisis will be. So that starts from an individual level. If you are going to cut down a tree, I think you will be ready to plant 10 or even more for the replacement of the impact that you have made. So for me, I believe that the effort starts from an individual, and also for the issue of policies. I think that's where the government and other partners will chip in and support the policy. But I believe that the effort starts from an individual. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, James. Now, before you leave, I'd like to hear what do you think now I'm talking to you, James. Apart from the general individuals, what do you think you as James? Do you think you can do something? You as James. I think James is not there. Okay, any other contribution? You as an individual. Now, let's hear maybe me as an individual. I think I can do something. I can do this, I can do that. Let's hear what things that can be done from an individual point of view.
Do I still have a chance? You have asked me a question.
Yes,
I got some technical.
Yes,
yes,
I wanted to speak,
yes,
please.
James.
May I go ahead kindly?
Okay,
Hello?
Parita, you can go ahead, and then James will also
Okay. Thank you.
contribute.
Thank you. You know, I'm just listening to the voices, and I really feel, look at it this way. We are all saying that countries have to have their policies, we implement. But if we look at America to be a global leader who has pulled out of the Paris Agreement, and it is also a leader, it is seen to be a leader in education. It is even stopping funding for many of its universities, which are offering courses on climate change. So, this means the education sector, which teaches issues to do with climate change, is really going to be impacted, and it will have to take a different turn in order to teach this concept. How will it impact globalization? Again, I have actually been reading about this, and I have seen Saudi Arabia and many other Middle East countries also following the same suit of the US. So if we as developing countries who depend on like climate finances, the funding comes from the developed world. So if President Trump has nullified the Paris Agreement, our funding is definitely going to decrease. How are we going to invest in sectors which are being impacted by climate change, like energy, transport, disaster management, forestry, wildlife, tourism, food security, manufacturing, reducing the carbon output? Really, how shall we look at it? Because this mega country is going to have trickling down impact on all the countries. So what can we do to see that the impact is not negative, but the positive impact still keeps on lingering? It's a food for thought. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Parita. Thank you. I can see that you're still with the global world, with the developed world. Now, well, I agree that this is actually now a challenge, but my question now was on you as an individual, Parita. Do you think that you should now sit and relax, or do you think you can do something?
Yes,
You as an individual.
definitely. Yes.
Okay.
As
Can
an
you,
individual,
okay. Can you say that? Yeah.
yes, as an individual from a developing country, we have to lobby the world leaders not to go in the direction of President Trump, because we have scientific evidence which we need to use to show that if we revert back to non-renewable fossil fuels, what will be the impact on climate change? History is repeating itself with negative consequences. Biodiversity is greatly going to be impacted. Human life, human health, the planetary health, all will be. So what we, or as an individual, we can do is to have scientific evidence to show global leaders during the global myths that look, what President Trump is doing, it is not sustainable for the whole world, not only for an individual mankind or a country or a region. And that's the best scenario we can do. And our leaders in individual countries need to be focused and need to have extremely good policies which are not only on paper like in Kenya, but we need to implement them fully so that we do not see the drastic negative climate change issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Parita. So, Parita, as a scientist, first you promised that you as a scientist, you have to do some research and come up with some evidence to convince this developing world. But also, you think that you can raise a voice and tell our politicians, police, and decision makers that they should go and lobby and make sure that these are the developing ways who are very important sources of funding to support the climate actions in our countries. They do they do not go. I mean, they do not go with the side of the US. Okay, thank you very much. I think that's actually I'm more interested in learning on what you as an individual can do. Any other contribution? Thank you, Parita. I hope you can do something on that as well as a student, but maybe
Okay.
to get a platform. Okay. Thank
Do I
you.
have a chance?
Welcome, Bible. Yes, please.
Okay, I'm Fabian again.
Okay,
So
welcome, Fabia.
thank you very much, madam. So I think climate change, the campaign starts with us individual, not even the global. So when we
Thank
look
you.
at, so when we look at ourselves as a country, okay, let me say as myself, what I can say for now, we are undergraduate students. Basically,
Yes.
I'm from Kenya. So creating awareness to other fellow youths that this is something that we need to do. Like, for example, disposing waste, like things that will influence our environment negatively. Those are things that we need to campaign for, things that we need to create awareness for, so that I think the little steps that the baby steps that we make is what will make our government now look at things differently. And once the government sees it differently, then things will actually change. So I think individually we need to look at things different because we are the change makers. So we start as students, then the government sees that we got a very legit information about something, then that is what will be implemented as a country. So we as students, we got a role, and that role is to create awareness through a lot of campaigns and also individually. Thank you very much, madam.
Thank you very much, Fabian. Thank you very much. Welcome, Mohammed. I see that we have 3 minutes.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you,
Mohammed.
madam. I think I'm clear, madam. I'm very
Yes,
audible.
yes.
Yeah, because
Yes,
I'm
yes. Please
somehow
go ahead.
undisciplined. Okay, thank you. Mine is to support the Vapian words. I'm believing that every individual has a responsibility when it comes to the issue of climate, not only for the government. For my case, I'm the founder of WOYA, which is One Youth Association, a community-based organization. And one of the thematic area we are working is climate change. So I think this change is something we take that responsibility, starting with individual. Not only for the government, believing that the government are not doing something related with the climate, they are not taking much serious. When it comes to the government and the side of the institution, you see that mostly the issue of climate is theoretically, not practically. So I'm believing as a youth, we are the people who can stand for that. When it comes to us as a warrior, we do the issue of a climate change. We mobilize the community for the best practice when it comes to climate change, the best way that they can utilize the little resource they have so that they don't misuse it. And then we also did it tree planting to the different institutions, almost 2,500. So I'm believing that responsibility to our shoulder. Sorry for if you are not getting me well because I'm in this place.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. You have coached you very well. And you have also insisted that the change begins with us. So I'm also on the side of that. While yes, we do expect the government to do something and the developed world to do something, but that should not stop us individually from doing something. Change starts with me. Start with your area of influence. We all have some areas of influence. Start with your area of influence. We have seen that there are some campaigns going on around among us among the groups. Then yes, those should go on. If you don't have a campaign, think of your individual actions. How do you what do you do that are having a negative impact on the climate? What can you do as an individual? So yes, while we are putting our eyes on the government levels and politicians and the developed world, let us also play our part. That's my take-home message that I'm giving you. So I would like everyone to think of their activities. Think of your everyday life activities, the food you eat, the way you travel, the way you are, the groups you're engaging in. Do you have any positive influence to the community with regard to climate action? What are you doing? Are you just sitting and waiting for the your minister of environment to go and do something, or you think that there is something you can do within your cycle of influence, within your daily activities that can actually have a positive impact? You start, the change starts with you. Next time, maybe you might end up being the future minister of environment. Then you'll do something at that level. But start within the level of you as a student and do something. Maybe if there is maybe one last comment, I can see that our time is up. Comment or question?
Thank you so much, madam.
Yes.
I think you got a technical where you asking me a question. It is James. I'm James.
Yes, James.
So it is typically that issue of climate change starts from an individual level,
Yes, James.
so that the global will come and just supplement what you did as an individual.
Yes.
For me, I have some activities that will make us maybe win against the climate change. and one is a tree planting activity,
Okay.
which everybody must impress on planting the trees.
Okay.
Secondly, is the issue of beekeeping, beekeeping, the apiculture. As we know that bees are the most or the most drivers of pollinating, the issue of pollination. So that's what makes the trees to multiply to be more and more and more.
Okay.
And
Thank you very
the
much.
last one, here in Kenya, we have most land that is being degraded. I think that's the part that we need also to take in and restore back the degraded. We restore back, maybe embracing on resilient designs. Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, James, for sharing what you're doing as an individual and what we as individuals, we are doing. I hope that the rest of the group have heard that we can do something as individuals. So as we'll go be now, I know that from here you will go through the full module 1 through the online training, self-paced and individual supervision. But I believe by the end of the module now, we'll be able to have identified, to have actually fully understood some of our activities that are actually affecting the climate. And then also, we'll come up with some individual, I can say, I don't know whether to call it commitment, but at least figure out some ways that you as individuals will do to contribute to the climate crisis, but also get a chance to understand what is happening globally. So our time is up. I think we should end up here. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending this first lecture, and thank you for your contribution. You were very active. I was happy. Thank you very much. Back to you, Mwangi, if you have any announcements, maybe.
Thank you for the interactive session. And thank you for an insightful and engaging session. You gained valuable knowledge about the climate change, from natural greenhouse effect, the key drivers of climate change, why is it a crisis, its impact on biodiversity, and whether there is still time to take action. I truly appreciate your time, Dr. Lilian, and in shedding light on these crucial topics. I can see many people are active and willing to contribute, but don't worry. The next session, we'll make sure we have a good number of time for the Q&As and for the contribution. Also, you can follow us on our social media accounts I've shared on the chat. Hoping everyone can access the schedule. Our next online lecture will be on it will be on 6th March. Maybe you can have some reactions and as we exit. Thank you, Dr. Lilian, for that session.
Okay, thank you very much, Mwangi. Thank you everyone for participating. I've enjoyed your participation. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Cynthia.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lilian. And everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
You
Thank
can
you. Thank you.
unmute yourself and say bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Next time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes.